Okay, ladies, I do think the audio is working this time around, but we will double check it at the end. This screencast is going to begin with the Iranian hostage crisis, and so if you've already gotten to this point in your specific class, you can fast forward a little bit to find out where you're located in the notes. I just want to say that we are going to go into minimal background on the screencast. I am going to watch a small little intro to a movie with you tomorrow that's going to show a little more background in terms of the United States' involvement in Iran, like before this crisis. That will make a little more sense. But we're going to watch that tomorrow. So for now, just take notes what I give you. So this crisis is going to circle and surround the leader of Iran, who is called the Shah. So the Shah is like a title of power, and the Shah of Iran at the time, in the late 70s, when Jimmy Carter was president, was a good ally to the United States. We were political allies with him, but mainly because he is westernized and he does what we like him to do in terms of selling oil to us, etc., and allowing our influence. The problem is that the rest of his country is not a really big fan of that. So it's kind of similar to how DM was a little corrupt and not the most effective leader of his own country. The Shah of Iran was considered very corrupt. He was also considered too westernized, and the people of Iran did not like him as leader because he was not a good leader to them, to be honest with you. Because of that, in the late 70s, a revolution will break out where a large portion of the Iranian population is going to be working to overthrow the government. And that revolution is working under the leadership of this man on the screen, the Ayatollah, whose last name is Khomeini. So you see him actually pictured. You see his full name, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, but we're going to just call him the Ayatollah Khomeini. He's leading this revolution, trying to overthrow the present Iranian government. And the Shah is actually overthrown. The rebels take control of the Iranian government. They establish a theocracy that was based on a strict interpretation of the Quran, which you know is like the Muslim, the sacred book of Islam, basically the holy word of that faith. And so this means that Iran has become a very radical kind of theocratic, very strict interpretation of the Quran, but also using that Quran in political law. So in a theocracy, there is no separation of church and state. So the rule of the religion is also the rule of politics and government. Now, Carter is president at this time. He is going to allow the Shah to escape into the United States for asylum. The Shah was actually suffering with cancer, and so he was seeking cancer treatments in the U.S. But the problem is that the revolutionaries want the Shah back. They want him, and they want to bring him to justice. Basically, they want to kill him. So they basically demand of the U.S. to return the Shah to the new Iranian government. Of course, since Carter is a human rights advocate as well as a friend of the Shah, he's going to refuse to do this. And so a large scale of protests break out across Iran, mainly in the capital city of Tehran, where the U.S. embassy was located. Eventually, a group of revolutionaries, mostly students, are going to seize the U.S. embassy. They're going to invade, and they are going to take 52 American hostages. This embassy was located in the city of Tehran. These militants basically demand that the U.S. send the Shah back to Iran in return for the hostages. And Carter refuses. He says, we're not going to negotiate with terrorists, and we're not going to send the Shah back just because you're making these terroristic approaches. Now, at the same time, they're working on a plan to free the hostages because we are concerned about the 52 Americans who are being held captive by these Iranian revolutionaries. But all attempts were pretty much unsuccessful, and this whole ordeal is going to last for over a year. And it's not really Carter's fault because he's trying to stay strong in his lack of negotiating with these people. But of course, you can imagine the family members begging Carter to release the Shah to Iran. you could tell eventually that these revolutionaries just really wanted to stick it to Carter because he actually will not be reelected, and Ronald Reagan will take control of the presidency. He's elected in 1980, and literally the day of his inauguration, the day of Reagan's inauguration, the day he was sworn into office, the hostages were officially released by the Iranian revolutionaries. This then gets to look really good for Reagan, who literally did nothing to negotiate the return, but they just happened to release the hostages on the day he joined office. So he's able to take kind of, not credit for that, but that's like, can you imagine that being the first political announcement you get to make as president? I want to announce that the hostages are going to be returned. Just looks really good on your part as president and not so good on Carter's. But they were really just trying to stick it to Carter. So again, we're going to go into more background over this incident, but it's a pretty famous hostage crisis in U.S. history. In total, the hostages had been kept for 444 days, over a year. Very trying and probably traumatic experience for them. We're going to end today just going over some environmental activism of the 80s, because I know obviously we're concerned about the environment, and not only the 80s but the 70s too. We're concerned about the environment today, and it seems to be, like just environmental stewardship and taking care of the earth seems to be a more proactive cause in our current society, but we've had to work for that and we still have a long way to go. With all of the industry and industrialization that's taken place in the country, it's really not until the 60s that enough people start talking about the fact that, hey, this pollution is probably really damaging our environment. And a lot of this discussion is going to come from a book that's published by a female author, Rachel Carson, who was a marine biologist. She writes a book called Silent Spring, and this book warns against the growing use of pesticides, saying that this poisons our food, it kills birds, it kills fish, it damages our ecosystem. It sells nearly 500,000 copies within the first 6 months it's out. So it just kind of shows you Americans are becoming more interested in the environment and just pollution control in general. Okay, we're also going to see the first Earth Day established. Earth Day is celebrated on April 22nd, and the first one of these is in 1970. This day is set aside for environmental education. This year, Earth Day did not fall on a weekday. I know in years past, the science department at school will do something special to celebrate Earth Day. They may have done something still, but just not on the actual day. The government will create what is called the EPA, which stands for the Environmental Protection Agency. It was actually Nixon who officially created this organization. He consolidated several different federal pollution programs into one overall government agency. The EPA is still in existence today, and it has the power to set and enforce pollution standards, as well as conduct environmental research and just assist and enforce state and local governments on matters of pollution control. This is just the first, official, large-scale government agency that is really focused on pollution standards and regulation, and they enforce the amount of emissions that plants release over a given year. There is an incident at a nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania called 3 Mile Island that is going to kind of start the discussion of the safety of nuclear power plants and just nuclear energy in general. So in the late 70s, a reactor overheated and radiation started to leak. This whole area of Pennsylvania was evacuated because this could have become a huge and very dangerous and scary problem if too much radiation was emitted into the air. But luckily, they were able to gain control of it, but it just still scared Americans and started fueling this debate over the use of nuclear energy. And y'all know that nuclear power plants are not the most common power plants today, and they're even further regulated. And I think there are examples of some in Louisiana, but we don't have many of them compared to the other types of plants we have, like chemical or petrochemical plants. A continuing movement, and I have these notes typed on the screen. This movement was met with opposition because it does kind of cause the loss of jobs. If you are going to impose regulations on industries and businesses, that's going to affect their profits, and they are going to have to lay off workers. That is a natural effect, but many Americans feeling this is important during this time. Some say we should be more concerned about jobs and worry about the environment later. That kind of sounds like pushing off the problems for the next generation, but that's okay. The movement does continue into present day, really, but it's still just a struggle between balancing environmental concerns with jobs and progress. And y'all still see that, like, when we have further regulations over industry does often complain that, we're holding them back with their research and everything, or the government's holding them back, is what I mean. But they're, again, we're trying to balance the well-being of the environment and Earth as a whole over progress and what's best for progress. If you have any questions about any of this, please let me know. We'll continue on with the Reaganomics tomorrow, as well as a little bit about the Cold War probably. But I will see you all in class tomorrow and write down any questions, and you'll have a great day.